Right, you may have noticed that on that corresponding squares 1 video, the sound just sort of cut out after 36 minutes. I have no idea why. We'd got to this position here. It's white to play. We've got to the point, hopefully, of we've seen corresponding squares and how they work. Can you have a go at this and work out? You pause the video. This is a Grigoriev study from 1922. Can you work out what to do as white? Can you work out, which are the corresponding squares, basically? So the first thing to say is that if it's black to move, white's just going to win this very easily. Black would have to play king g6 to hold on to the f pawn. Black, by the way, has to stay inside this square. Otherwise, you just push the e pawn. So black's only sensible move here, really, if it was black to play is king g6. We push the e pawn. Black has to come back to f7. We take on f5, and then we can just outflank the black king and win this d pawn quite happily. And if you get to one of these 3 key squares, then we've won. I mean, we'll see that in a minute if we get back to this position with black to move. So straight away that tells us that these are corresponding squares. Secondly, if the white king gets in down the king side, like onto the h5 square, it's pretty clear that white's won that as well. Basically for the same reasons, thinking about it. So black can't let white get in to h5. And this means that if the white king is on h4, which we'll do in blue, the black king needs to be on g6. The black king can't be on h6 because it needs to stay inside the square of the e pawn. So g6 is the square that corresponds to h4. And this, of course, means that if the black king is on g3, the white king, sorry, is on g3, the black king needs to be on a square where they're ready to jump to either f6 or g6. They need to be ready to jump to either green or blue. The only square that black king can do that and stay inside the square of the e6 pawn is there. So then you're on to thinking about f3, and f3 you're ready to jump to green or red, and black could be like, that's alright, I can use a blue square for that. So you're not really being clever going to f3. I'll just go to g6. I can have g6 corresponding to both f3 and h4. You can't get from f3 to h4 in one move, so I can do that. That's fine. But then what about this square, g2, basically? In fact, I think h3 might be a green square as well, actually, if we think about it. Yeah, I think it is, isn't it? So forget about g2 for now. I think if the white king's on h3, ready to jump to red or blue, the black king also needs to be ready to jump to red or blue. The only square on the chessboard, or the only square in this square of that the black king needs to stay in, where they're ready to jump to red or blue, is f6. So that h3 square also corresponds to h3 and f6 correspond. So then we look at g2, and you can see that if the white king is on g2, it's ready to go to f3, g3, or h3. Black doesn't have a square where they're ready to jump to blue, red, or green. That's the square they'd like to use, but it's covered by the e pawn. So that's the win. Well, what should we play first of all? I suppose I'd go king g3 first of all, and see what black does there. Maybe they'll go king g7. Maybe I'll go king h3 after that. I mean, you could do a bit of messing around and see if black understands it, but you can just come back to g2. That's the important bit. So yeah, let's go king g3. Black king has to come to g7, and then king g2 is the winning move. Remember, they correspond. Oh, sorry, I did them in green. I think they were all corresponding squares, weren't they? I forget what colour I did them in. Sorry, I think I did it in blue actually. h4 and g6 correspond also to f3, and then g7, g3 correspond. So I think I had that one in orange. Where does the black king go? I mean, it's had it, basically. I mean, it could go back, and then we're going to come into well, f3 or h3 is going to be fine there. Yes, if the black king goes back, we can come to h3. It's got to go, so it's got to stay inside the square and get back. Let's look at that. That's a possible example. So if we go here, we're now ready to come to h4. It's got to get back ready. Remember, those two squares correspond. So it's got to get back to g6, but stay inside the square. It's got to be ready to meet king h4, king g6. But the only square where it can do that is this g7 square, which corresponds to g3. So you'd play king to g3. I mean, it's over really, isn't it? Black needs to be ready to jump to one of those. So let's just say that, yeah, let's go to that final position that I was saying originally. If it's black to move, it's a win. We see king g6, e7, king f7, king takes f5. I wonder if actually I think black's got a sneaky try here. Is king e8 a sneaky try? Oh no, not really. You can still just play king f6. So black has no sneaky tries. It's just over. So well done if you got that. Right, have a go at this one. Pause the video, white to play. See if you can work out the corresponding squares. The first thing to notice is if the white king gets to e2, then white's won. Because if the white king's got to e2, it's going to get, so that's a key square, it's going to get to e3. If you think of the white king's on e2, well, first of all, if the white king gets to e3, they've definitely won. Okay, I mean, we could just, if we imagine the white king being on e3, where would the black king even be that's going to do anything at all? Well, probably the best place to be would be d5. And so I guess you'd need to think about what would happen if the white king was on e3 and the black king was on d5. You'd need to see that you can win by pushing the d pawn, and it's a case of counting out moves. King c4, king e4, king takes b4, and then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 moves to get a queen, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 moves for black to get a queen. It's a knight's pawn, it's over. Okay, so black cannot allow the white king to get to e3, and if black allows the white king to get to e2, it's threatening king e3. Excuse me. And the only places that black could stop that happening are f4 and d4, either of which we could just play king f2, and then we're getting to, or if the black king was on f4, the white king's on e2, then we could play king f2 and we're coming into e3. So these are already corresponding squares because black has to stop the white king getting to e2. We can also see that if the white king was on c3, then the black king needs to be on e3. It's fairly obvious that we need to stop king d4 if we're black. So those squares correspond, and that means that c2, where white's ready to jump to green or blue, black needs to be ready to jump to green or blue. And it has to be that square. It can't be f2 because the d pawn runs. So c2 and f4 correspond. Then you're looking at b2. We could look at b2 and white's there ready to jump to blue or red. So black could be like, well, I've got the f3 square. That's just green again. I can sit on, if your king's on b2, I can sit on f3. I'm ready to jump to red or blue. It doesn't matter that I'm already sat on a green square because your king can't get to d2. So, well, that one's just green as far as I'm concerned. And then here comes the killer. b3. That's where your white king's going. If you're on b3, you're ready to jump to red, blue or green. There is no square on the chessboard for black because that one's covered by the d pawn where black is ready to jump to red, green or blue. So that's the win. We'd go king c2, f4 corresponds to c2, go king b2, f3 corresponds to to b2, but then you go to b3. And again, I forget the colours. I might have, was it this? Forget which colours I used. But there's black's problem. It's black to play. I mean, you can kind of see it there really now, can't you? King e3 is met with king c3. That's fairly obvious. Should we go for the less obvious one? King f4 is met by king c2. Again, that's fairly clear. And I mean, what does black do really? Oh, they got this little sneaky try. They can go back to e5, and you've got to be just a bit careful here. I should have drawn another colour on the board back at this stage actually, which is that I think that's green as well. I think if the white king's on d2, then the black king can sit quite happily on d4. I don't think it's true for b2 actually, because then they can't get to the blue. But yeah, anyway, let's go back to this position here. I think king d2, black could play king d4, and now, I mean, it's still a win for white because of that. You know, we haven't been forced into the undesirable result, but we do need to sort of start again as oh, sorry. We do need to start again here as white. Would need to go back to the b3 square and so on. So yeah, king d1's the move, so you have to be able to meet king d4 with king d2. What can black try here? They can go to, they're not stopping you getting to the e3 square really. It's just done. So back in this position, maybe they could try king f3, but now we've arrived at the starting position, and again the white king's going to enter e3. So they were your corresponding squares. Just get that off the board. Well done if you got that. Right, next. This one was from a game, I think, that happened between some Super GMs like a couple of years ago. I can't remember who it was. I just remember that whoever it was played their move and then was just immediately annoyed with themselves that they'd obviously blundered. Yeah, so pause the video, see if you can work out what the corresponding squares are, and hence what your move should be as white. I think this one's actually relatively simple, as you know, compared to some of the others we've looked at, which is sort of even more unusual that a Super GM messed it up, if you like. I mean, I'm sure they'd have been horrified with themselves because obviously way within their ability. The first corresponding squares to possibly note are the e2 and the e4 squares. If the black king's on e4, the white king absolutely has to be on e2. You can see that, otherwise you have had it. If the black king gets to c4, you can see that you've also had it. And that means that if the black king's on d5, we need to guard the c4 square, and we also need to be ready to play king e2. Okay. Or in fact, if we're on d3, not only are we ready to play king e2, but we're also stopping the black king getting to e4 anyway. You can see if you're on c3, black plays king e4, you can't get to e2. So d3 and d5 correspond. If the black king's on e5, it's ready to jump to blue or green. So we have to be ready to jump to blue or green. d2 and e5 correspond. And at the moment, the black king is ready to jump to blue or red. We are also ready to jump to blue or red. Unfortunately, it's our move, so we need to move to a place where we're still ready to jump to blue or red. Well, king c3 is the move. I mean, I've run out of colours, but in some of the other corresponding squares positions that we've looked at, what would happen is that it would get to the point where black's got a choice, as they have here, d6 or e6, where they're always ready to jump to blue or red, and white runs out of choices. But here, white doesn't run out of choices. You can have c3 corresponding to e6 and c2 corresponding to d6. I don't know if it's the same the other way around. It might be. I'm sorry, I'm just thinking about the f6 and c1 squares there, but the point is that yeah, we can go to c3 quite happily. So I can get these colours off the board, and we can say that c3 corresponds to e6. So king c3 would just draw the game. I mean, if both players had sort of realised that, we could have seen the game end in a bit of a king dance on these squares. I forget what white played, but pretty sure they just messed it up. I think they might have played king d2, and then black went king e5, and they resigned. Walked off in a huff or something. I can't remember the details. But that's actually from a game. And corresponding squares, for my money, covers it quite well. I mean, it simplifies it, and it makes it sort of a very doable, a very gettable move and drawing technique, basically. Now this one is a study. Again, pause the video and give it a go, see if you can work out what the corresponding squares are. And I think I mean, the last one was a game. Yeah, that was from an actual game, and corresponding square solves it very nicely. This one isn't from a game. You could see it maybe could come from a game, but we are actually, in my view, now starting to step towards where it's getting a bit too bonkers. So if you go online and find a corresponding squares video, you might find where they get into some really ridiculous ones. I think Lasker ended up setting one 100 years ago or whatever, where the white king's on a1, the black king's on h8, and it turns out that the white king has to go to b1 as the only winning move, because b1 corresponds to h8 or whatever, and king a2 or king b2 throw away the win. They're just ridiculous, and there's sort of series of doubled pawns all over the place. And I mean, they're funny, but it's more like a puzzle than chess, if you ask me. And the argument of transferable skills starts to become very shaky, basically. And this one's not too far away where it starts to become a bit shaky, but not completely. It's definitely worth having a go at this, in my view. So see if you can work out what the corresponding squares are, and then how you're going to exploit it to win the game as white. Pause the video and have a go. So one of the first things you could do is work out the key squares, and if a white king lands on d4, it's clearly gone. In fact, it's completely gone. There isn't even a square where the black king could be that stops king takes e4 on the next move. The other key square, which isn't necessarily easy to see straight away because it doesn't look like it's a square white can even go to, is c5. But the point is if the black king's not defending c5, that the pawn push c5 wins and the white king's coming in. We could see black could try and be clever and sort of leave it there, but I don't think it does anything. I suppose black's best try would be to put their king on d5 when the c5 pawn push happens, but then we can just take on b6, and white's just got too many squares for their king. Maybe we'll see that again in a minute. Once we've used the corresponding squares to break in, we'll have a look at that final position. So if you accept that they're the key squares, it's again clear that already b4 and d6 correspond. Black has to meet king b4 with king d6, and they have to meet king c3 with king e5. So if the white king's on b3, we're ready to jump to blue or green, and it's then clear the black king needs to be on e6, so b3 and e6 correspond. So all we need to do then as white is basically use these two squares. We can use the b2 and the c2 squares. So if we play, I don't know, we play king c3, black plays king e5. Let's come back to c2. Okay, Black's got to move somewhere where they're ready to jump to red or blue, because if we're on c2, we're ready to jump to red or blue. They can't use the f5 or the d5 squares, so they would have to either use the d6 square or the f6 square, where they're ready to jump to red or blue. But then we can come to the other orange square where we're still ready to jump to red or blue, and you can see that wherever the black king is, d6 or f6, they're not ready to jump. There's nowhere. There's nowhere they can go where they're then ready to jump to red or blue, and then we can exploit that. What should we do? Should we have the? Well, let's have the king going back to e6, and then we'll meet them on b3. So let's play that out. King c3, that corresponds to e5. King c2, where we're ready to jump to. I forget what the colours were, but we're ready to jump to these two. So black needs to be ready to jump to either e5 or e6. So we could go, I don't know, king f6. And now we're still ready to jump to what was red or... these were corresponding, weren't they? Might have remembered the colours wrongly again. But we're still ready to jump to red or blue. What does black do? They're stuffed. They've got to go somewhere where they're not ready to jump to red or blue. So if they go on blue straight away, remember b3 corresponds to e6. And let's do the one that I said I was going to do at the start, where it's like, okay, it's d4 is pretty obviously lost, but let's have a look at this. So c5. If black doesn't take it, I think it's king d5 black's best try. I think surely that's very obvious. If black takes that, they've lost. Let's try king d5. We take on b6, and black's just got no way to keep you out. You've just got too many squares. It's just a simple case of outflanking. And we want to meet king c4 with king e5, don't we? But you know, we've got to play king e5 now, and yeah, it's done. Okay, so hopefully now we've seen it. You know, not so difficult to see that you can't allow the c5 pawn push. So that's it. Yeah, you just get the corresponding squares, green, blue, and red, and then use b2 and c2. White's got two squares they can keep moving back and forth on, where they're ready to jump to red or blue. Black hasn't, so white wins. Now this one's pretty cool. I like this one. I'm just sort of thinking about time, because I've got one video already that lasts 36 minutes. This one's about 23 minutes. And there's going to have to be a third one, but this one's only happening because the sound went wrong on the first one. So I'm just trying to time it, so we'll probably end up with about 3 half-an-hour videos. But to have a go at this one, white to play. There's more going on than just corresponding squares. There's some stuff to calculate. But ultimately, once the stuff to calculate has been calculated, it becomes hopefully then clear which squares correspond. So yeah, pause the video and have a go at seeing if you can, well, work out what white does. And I suppose I would argue that corresponding squares helps you work out what white should do here. Yeah, so the extra thing that needs calculating here is that black's got this passed h pawn, and it's trivial that if at any time this h pawn gets pushed with the white king able to enter the square of this pawn, then white's won. I mean, white just goes and takes the h pawn and then comes back and yeah, wins the f pawn as well, and just completely wins. So I was pausing there because I was thinking if the black pawn's on h5, black would have to meet king h6. If the black pawn was on h5, black would have to meet king h4 with king h6, but they can only get to h6 from g7, and I guess that's a corresponding squares thing already. So we can just move back and forth on g3 and h3 until black moves away from g7, and then you come into h4. either to take the opposition or to win the h-pawn. So it's fairly trivial that if black pushes the h-pawn, it's gone for black. However, you've got the added problem that if white steps up to the 7th rank, then black can just push the h-pawn to queen, and the at first glance the white king can't stop it. Or in fact, that's just true. If black's just hell-bent on, as soon as white's moved to the 7th rank, I will push my h-pawn all the way to become a queen, it is just true that white can't stop it. Which doesn't sound good, right? h1 equals queen, but it doesn't necessarily matter that white can't stop it. That's a clue to sort of a fact, in fact, that you need to solve this. So these two squares correspond, by the way, because if it's black to move, it's obviously just lost. Okay, so those squares correspond. Okay, and the second thing that you sort of need to work out is, what if the black king was on g8, and we could move our king to e7. So I'm looking at these two squares because you're threatening to take on f6, which means black has to defend it, kind of. Or one of the thoughts black might have is like, oh, you're attacking f6, I have to defend it. But as soon as black defends it, you play king e6. We know they correspond, and you've won. So, I mean, there's still something else we need to talk about, but they correspond because black's either going to drop the f-pawn or come to g7, king e6, and then drop the f-pawn. But they only correspond if something else that we now need to check isn't a thing. Because having realised that king g7 loses, black will push the h-pawn. This is the sort of the other thing that we need to calculate. So h5, king takes f6, h4, g7, h3, king g6, h2, f6, queen, rook, knight, bishop, don't care, f7 checkmate. Okay. There was something else we didn't talk about there though. h5, king takes f6, h4, g7, king h7, king f7, h3, check, check, mate. Even easier. So we've seen that if it's black to move and the kings are here, black's lost. Pushing the h-pawn doesn't work, and you get a really beautiful checkmate even though black's got a queen on h1. So it's not just a case of corresponding squares moving the kings in and thinking about don't care what's happening to the pawns. There is that going on as well, but once you've calculated all of that, you see that e7 and g8 correspond. So we know these squares correspond. We know these squares correspond. We know these squares correspond. And that means that if the white king is on d6, we're ready to jump to red or green, which means black needs to be ready to jump to red or green. And I think they've got two possibilities here, haven't they? One reasonably obvious one is f8. I think h8 would work just as well. If I'm wrong about that, black could just use f8, but I think it looks to me like it works just as well. And then you kind of hit a problem. It's just like, okay, well, how do you sort of navigate that around? I mean, we could go to d5, couldn't we, where we're ready to jump to green or blue. Black doesn't care about that. They just go to g8, where they're ready to jump to green or blue. We've got to be damn careful not to come out the square. I don't think that comes out the square, does it? c6, where we're ready to jump to... or does that come out the square? Hang on. No, it doesn't. We're ready to jump to green or blue. To red or blue, sorry. But black could just come back to g7. And what happens there on king c5, actually? I might have calculated something wrongly there. I know that it doesn't work to go over to c5. It might be there's more to it than just those particular colours. So I'm just going to pause the video, pause my recording, sorry, and quickly work out, because it looks like I've sort of set something up where we can ready to jump to red or blue over here. What's going on? I just paused my recording there and briefly went and investigated it, because I just suddenly got a bit confused that in the middle of talking through it, I've found a solution that isn't the really beautiful one I was about to show. But it just also works. I mean, I tested it out. I beat Stockfish on level 8 with not even bothering to do the extra daring, risky thing that you're about to see. Because we can stay inside the square of the H-pawn, and we've just got to make our way to the C5 square, where we're ready to jump to green, blue or red. And black doesn't have a square. Black doesn't have a square where they're ready to jump to green, blue or red. So that does actually win it, which is remarkable. So yeah, but I found a second solution. Unless I'm missing something, feel free to put a comment on the videos a comment on in the comment section of, is there something I'm missing? I mean, I've just beaten Stockfish on level 8 using going to C5 and then jumping to the corresponding square, blue, green or red. It's just worked. Anyway, let's get these off the board and show a different solution, which is also quite elegant as well. And it's the D7 square. That's your extra square. Okay. Now, obviously, if the black king's on G7 and you play King D7, you've lost, because the black will just push the H pawn. So King D7 is a winning move, but you've got to play it. So you've got to be ready to jump to green, red or blue. You've got to play it when black has to waste a move, if you like, getting back to G7. So there's a bit more than corresponding squares going on here. We've actually got the same pawn raise checkmate thing going on, but also there's a dual purpose king move that you needed to be aware of, or as it turns out didn't need to be aware of, because I've just found a second solution. So yeah, you don't play King D7 here. We're going to play King D6, which forces in fact, King E7 also lose. Any move to the 7th rank on this go is going to lose. So we're not going to do that. We're going to play King D6. Black will go to F8 or H8. I don't think it matters, actually. But F8 seems the more sensible square. So let's do that. Let's go to D6. Black will go to the corresponding square, which is F8. And now we're going to go to D7. So they were blue squares. They were green and they were red. They all corresponded. And now I'm on the D7 square, so I'm ready to jump to red, green or blue, which of course wins the game, because black can't go to a place where they're ready to jump to green, red or blue. F7 would be nice, but they can't go there because the G6 pawn covers it. However, there is a bit of an extra thing to worry about here, which is like, well, you're outside the square of the H pawn. So the H pawn runs and you can't stop it. And when I first saw this study, the thing that took me ages on it, that I didn't manage to get, basically, was you can sort of compartmentalize it. The black king is stopping the G pawn. If it wants to, it just goes back to G7. And independently of that, the H pawn is queening because the white king's too far away. It's like, well, no, it's not independent of that. That was the thing that took me a long time to realise. So what am I talking about? Well, black pushes the H pawn. We're not going to get in the square, but here's your dual purpose king move, King E6. If black's hell-bent on queening the H pawn, we are going to transpose into the same elegant checkmate. Have we seen this already? I'm not sure we have, but there it is. That's that checkmate. And if black doesn't, and they play King G7, the sort of the compartmentalizing it, it's not two separate compartments. this move was one move towards the catching of this pawn, and now we're back in the square. So white plays that and wins in the way we talked about at the beginning. I think it's done, actually. King d6, King f8. There is that second solution that I found, which is quite interesting. But King d7, and yeah, if black pushes the h-pawn, we've got the dual-purpose king move, where we're either going to get the checkmate trick or get back in the square of that h-pawn. Or, from a corresponding squares point of view, they corresponded, they corresponded, they corresponded. I mean, I think that one does as well. And we're on d7. We're ready to jump to red, green, or blue. There is nowhere on the chessboard for black to jump, to be ready to jump to red, green, or blue. So I've just sort of surprised myself that in the middle of explaining it, I've actually come up with a second solution. Do let me know if you think I've said something funny there. I think that's definitely red, isn't it? Because we're ready to jump to green or blue. That's also green, because we're ready to jump to blue or red. So if our king was on c6, black would have to be king g7. And if we're on c5, we're ready to jump to red, green, or blue. So we didn't need to do the daring, oh my word, you're letting the pawn go. It's okay, we've got a dual purpose king move. We can just win it with that little corresponding squares thing. Excellent. I'm going to call it a day there. I've still got more corresponding square stuff to do, so I'm going to call that corresponding squares 2, and then make a corresponding squares 3, and then I think we're done on corresponding squares. Hope you're enjoying it so far.